All right, cool. So we are back. Hopefully it went good. Oh man, didn't. I just rebooted the computer. It crashed, and I didn't reboot the sequencer. But let's just keep moving. I just wanted to show you. Sorry about this. It always happens. I just wanted to show you two more cliches. It's gonna be. It's gonna take a little bit for this to open. Just gonna keep. So, just share with me real quick. How did it go? Did you have any struggle? Anything that you'd like to mention? If not, I'll keep going. But I'm curious. Test. Oh, go. All right, so I'll keep moving, and then I'll go back to the. I'll go back to the style when QH is working. All right, so we've seen all these. Now I just So real quick, the different. Now those who joined today, we've seen here. We'll see love and sadness a few days later on. We saw these the last 2 weeks. We saw these two styles. I explained it real quick. I didn't cover the orchestration, but you know, like harmonically, melodically, when they are and how suspense is different. Action with intensity, I mentioned it's sort of like the same thing, right? Just wanted to give you a brief overview of what we're gonna be seeing the next days, and so you get sort of like an idea. So that's suspense and action mid intensity is sort of the same thing. It's just action mid intensity, slower harmonic movement, and a more intense motor. All right. So if suspense has a little bit of repetition, sometimes a little bit of like soft, like subtle ostinatos, the ostinatos are gonna be more. It's gonna be there in action mid intensity. Action high intensity is just just breaking everything apart. It's just craziness. It's just if action mid intensity, it's harmonically it's a little bit more dense with dissonance and all that. Action high intensity is gonna be way more dissonant. In terms of tempo, we're gonna have tempo changes. We're gonna have meter changes. We're gonna modulate from one key to another. We're gonna have chords that are not related from different keys. A lot of changes, a lot of syncopation, a lot of instability. And in terms of orchestration, same thing, right? We're gonna go from one section to the other. We're gonna have contrast. We're gonna have a lot going on. This is one of the hardest styles. It's not hard when you understand it. It just takes time to write because there's a lot of information. There are a lot of notes to input, all right? And then from that we will transition to find fantasy and magic. To me, if you understand love, sadness, and fantasy, sort of from that we can go to any other style. Fantasy is different to everything else. So fantasy magic is different than everything else. And then we have supernatural grandeur. And such supernatural grandeur is very similar to magic, which is just the orchestration is very, very, very different. I'll explain this when we get there. How are we doing? Okay, we're still loading. All right, so that's that. Can we move? No, I can't because I need the sequencer. I could have maybe opened a smaller session. I'm going to talk about this real quick. So because I mentioned that you can go from one style to the other. I just wanted you to understand real quick. This may sound very, very basic for some of you. I just wanted to talk real quick. Oh, right, we have this. I'll talk about this in a second. Let's continue with suspense. All right.
Hey, Mark, you muted.
Am I? What are you talking about? All right, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Positive.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Simon. All right, so let's continue with, hopefully, there you go. One second. My computer crashed and I had to reboot everything. Where is this? Yeah, all right. Come on. Still. Right. So real quick recap. Okay. So we've seen Suspense. I'm gonna finish Suspense in a second. We'll see two more cliches, and then but just a quick recap of what we saw the last couple of weeks. Those who join now, will see Love and Sadness later. Not in this class, in another class. But just a quick recap where this style stands and how different it is from the styles that we've seen and the styles that we will see. All right. So we've talked about Love and Sadness. So Love is major chords, major keys, and major chords. Sadness is gonna be minor. Suspense the same thing as minor. As Sadness, but we're gonna be those minor chords with a twist, a dissonance, something like this, and then it's not gonna be as melodic. It's gonna be more motivic. When we transition to action mid intensity, it's gonna be even less. It's even less melodic. It's gonna be more motivic. So it's going to be even less thematic, it's going to be more motivic, or sometimes we even won't have a melody at all or a motive at all. And we will include, the type of harmonies are going to be similar, those minor harmonies with a twist, and then we're going to include a motor, right? We may have that subtle motor ostinato here, it's going to be more intense here. And when we go to action high intensity, it's action high intensity is it's gonna be craziness, right? It's gonna have it's contrast. So we may have short melodies, short motifs, but it's gonna be very fragmented. We're gonna go from one section to the other. The orchestration is gonna be very fragmented. It's gonna be a lot of contrast. It's gonna be lots of syncopation. It's gonna be tempo changes. It's gonna be time signature changes. We're gonna go harmonically. It's gonna be very unstable, etc. This is one of the hardest styles. It's not hard when you understand. It's just there's a lot going on and very fast. So you have to put a lot of notes in there. So it just takes time. Okay. And then fantasy and magic is something very different than everything else that we've seen. When we get there, we'll talk about that one. Let me just see if this is working. Yes, cool. I know I don't have them connected. All right. So that's that, okay? Magic Fantasy is very different, and then we will see Supernatural Grandeur, which is very similar to Magic Fantasy in terms of harmonies, and the orchestration is completely different. That one is way more homophonic, and this one is going to be more contrasting and fragmented. All right, cool. So let's finish this. I just wanted to share with you two more cliches, okay? So we have seen this part here, the tororaro, this part here. And this is not working obviously because I have to. Can I try to reconnect all? I don't know if this is gonna work. No. I need to go here, and then remote desktop, and then go to my Vienna. Come on. Sorry, these are the things that happen when computer crashes. You know what? I don't care. I'm just gonna load the track here. It's gonna be an audio track. No, instrument track. It's gonna be contact. Let's see if this works. It's gonna go straight to the master bus, and hopefully this is gonna work. This is yeah. All right, cool. So I'm just gonna load. Just gonna go with Albion. This will do. Albion, individual patches, strings. Now, individual patches, strings long. There you go. Boom. All right. So just another cliche. Which is so like the lurking around type. Where's here? Here. Okay. It goes like this, right? You have a very high note. It's a very slow moving melody. Starts with one high note, usually violins, and then you have like the violin second, or maybe it's the BC violins one, and then you have another section of violins playing a very similar melody that is in sort of like dissonant intervals with the melody. So something like this. Let me just. Right, so we've done this. I'm gonna duplicate this track here. Right. So I'm gonna record a little bit. Record. I'm gonna extend this region. Select both of them. Double click. So the first one does this, right? And then the second one, which is this, I'm gonna record. Let's see. So let's see. So the first note, well, it came in here. It's dissonant, right? It's this this ninth here, or this the seventh. Here it's like it's a minor third, so no problem. When we've got a minor second, and then here's a tritone, right? Could have done something different, right? Maybe. Oh, I don't have this note. It's too high. Okay, so maybe so if sorry, it's an ensemble patch that doesn't have those low high notes. I'm gonna move this down an octave just for. It's not perfect, but not in. All right, I prefer it higher, but anyway. And then I'm gonna select the conductor too. This is too high, so I'm going to bring it down. That's why we're doing here. All right, so we've got the second here, tritone, and the tritone again. So it's just, it's just having a melody that sounds suspense sort of thing, and then having a second line a little bit lower in volume that doesn't conflict with the first one, except that you are enhancing the dissonant intervals, all right, as much or a little bit, as much as you want if you want it to sound darker, or as little as you want if you just add a little bit of tension and suspense feel to it. Okay, so that's another cliche. And finally, the super typical. I think I shared this with you before, but it's having the two high notes here, like something like this. Oh man, I recommend using a better patch. Okay, like I recommend using the violins 1 and violins 2 instead of using an ensemble patch. It just template crashed, and I can show everything. I need to go to my server computer to do something so I can reconnect, and I'll do it in a second. But so you record like 1 or 2 notes dissonant, right? This is a minor second, or the typical cliche is the minor second, and then having the I'll move this up here, and then having another note low here, the lower octave, right here. So something like this. Let me just record this so you can see exactly what's going on. You can see both of them. I'm gonna get rid of this, don't show. Oops, select the second one. Something weird happens around here. I think it's the sample loops, and it doesn't connect very well. I don't know what happened. But anyway, I would record this with a double bass, not with an ensemble strings patch. I would do this with a double basses patch, and I would do this with violins 1 patch, and this with violins 2 patch. So I have control over the exact swell of each note. And then I get a little bit more separation. You see this separation, both register and also position, left, right, violins 1, 2, and double bass register, right? This very open type of sound works well in this style. All right, so cliché. So we've seen the first example. Then we've seen the do type of cliché. Then we've seen the high notes, you know, with dissonant interval sort of thing, and then this one. Okay, these all work very well. So those are tools for you to use in this style. Okay. There are many other things that you can do, but that's when you come in and you add your own thing, your own spin, your own voice, and then you create the thing that makes you unique. All right, cool. Any question before we move on? I've got some other things for today.
Yep. Short question. How do we get to? Can you say some tips for creating structure? If it's clearly not harmonic movement, but we have to create some. Is it motivic development? How do you come to a longer piece than 8 bars?
Cool. All right. So I'm gonna answer this question. So here's how you do this. So first of all, understanding the tools, okay, the tools that you have, and the tools are gonna be the variation for one, and then but also understanding what you can do harmonically and in terms of orchestration and what effects that's gonna have emotionally. That's understanding the tools that you have. So development, like variation. And then that variation can be melodic, harmonic, or other type that I'll explain in a second. And then understanding also how to use the harmony and orchestration and what effect it's gonna have. So that's the first thing. Okay, so that's the first thing. Cool. So let me just load the piano here real quick to explain a few things. I'm gonna duplicate this track. And I'm gonna name this piano, and I'm gonna open it, and I'm gonna select just the first piano that I see here. Where are you? This one. Okay. Just the. I think this will do it. All right, cool. Cool. All right. So very basic within one style. Oh, so first of all, how to develop that? First, why do we need to develop? Is it library music type of suspense style that we are writing? It's more like suspense / trailer that has a very specific structure, or is it something that you are following the scene, right? So if you are, depending on what it is, it'll have a more like a stronger structure or a more loose structure. So if you are scoring the screen, if you are doing so if you have a scene, then the music is going to follow the scene. That's going to dictate the exact structure. Still, you need to know how to develop this, so you have the tools to say the same thing in a different way. All right. So that's the first thing. And finally, if it's music for video games, it's going to be interactive. You're going to separate this in different layers, and then the engine is going to do the development for you. But still, you need to understand the tools that you have to put them there so that the engine can do its own thing based on what you previously designed. Okay, so a little bit of very basic understanding of harmony and orchestration. So just within within suspense, that we know how to create suspense. You know, we know that if we use major chords, we're gonna enhance the positive emotions. If we use the negative chord, the minor chords, we're gonna enhance the negative emotions, right? If we add dissonances, right? If we extend those notes with the major chord, we're gonna, if we add the seventh and the major seventh and all the ninth, etc., we're gonna add color and emotion to that positive emotion. And the minor chords, if we add extensions and dissonances, we're going to create more tension, right? We're going to darken the sound a little bit. Now, that's in terms of the chord, right? If within that suspense type of sound style, we introduce a little bit of like the way we move the chords. We move a little bit away from the way we would move the chords in a suspense type of a style, and we move them in a more traditional tonal diatonic type of chord progression. Then we're gonna again gain a little bit of those positive emotions, right? If those are major chords, if those are minor chords, they're gonna be sadness, but not as much suspense, right? So those things, so depending on the scene, right? Maybe it's suspense, but there's a sad moment. You know what to do, right? You know how to change or morph harmonically to get closer to sadness. All right. So and then if we move the chords in non-traditional way, like moving them in thirds, like or parallel movement and all that, then we're gonna stay more in the suspense. Ominous darker if it's minor chords, depending on how we orchestrate this, and we'll talk about orchestration in a second. And then it's gonna sound more like magic, fantasy, supernatural. And it's very common to go from suspense to fantasy sometimes, right? It's just the way we move the chords, right? Okay. Now, if we move them faster, we're gonna enhance the emotion. If we move them slower, we're gonna create that stillness that sometimes is so effective, right? We have a dialogue and we just need some sort of like drowny type of music that gives support to the scene but doesn't add too much emotion. So those are things that you can do, right? And harmonically to develop depending on what the demands from the scene, all right? Or if you're not writing for a movie or for a scene and you're just doing like library music that you have a very specific structure, still though these are things that you can do depending on the outcome. So that's in terms of harmony. In terms of orchestration, before I talk exactly what things to do, very basic concepts on orchestration that I would like you to know. Most of you may know this, but just real quick, orchestration, because for some of you it's a new thing. But orchestration of three big sections: strings, brass, woods. In terms of loudness, strings sit in the middle. Strings can sound very, very soft, very, very loud. Woodwinds won't sound as loud as the strings. So when we have strings and woodwinds, the woodwinds will color the strings, but they won't sound louder than the strings. So the sound will sort of like blend in the strings. And the brass is the loudest section, so it's always going to sound louder, especially in the fortissimo. So if we have fortissimo, like if we had every instrument in the orchestra performing the best note in the best range, fortissimo, we would hear brass, then strings, and then a little bit of woodwinds coloring the sound a little bit, but lower in the mix. Okay. Now, if you want if you want the woodwind to stand out, then you will have to orchestrate the rest. Like you will have to orchestrate the background material in a way that allows the woodwind to stand out, right? So if you want a flute to stand out, you're gonna have the flute in the upper register, because where the flute actually cuts through the mix better, and then you're gonna have a quieter, not as active, maybe strings pad in the mid low range, because you don't want to conflict with the melody, etc. Right? So then, in terms of sound, in terms of voicing, give me 1 second, Ali. In terms of voicings, that is something that's also, so we've seen in general we're gonna have more open voicings here in the lower register and more closed voicings in the upper register. But if we break that rule, then we sound more like one style or more like another style. So that more open voicing here and closer voicing here works great for for love or sadness or adventure, hero, all these things, right? But if we need to sound a little bit darker, right, having a big space in the middle, right, like what we've done, Suspense, very typical. Having closed voicings here with the brass, darker tone, more ominous, right? So that works good for action mid intensity, action high intensity, this type of style. So if we need to go from suspense to action mid intensity, okay, I should be able. I just want to exemplify all this. 1 second. Remote. Let's see if I can connect now. Yes. All right, fantastic, cool. Come on. Fantastic. All right. File disconnect all. Yes. Yes, that's what I want. Cool. And now I should be able to open this guy here and then retry all. Yes, fantastic. All right. Getting my template back. All right. So that's that. So now just a word of caution with woodwinds. There are, in terms of sound, so in terms of loudness, we describe strings, woodwinds, softer, and brass, louder, right? In terms of sound, like how homogeneous and how heterogeneous, the strings, again, is in the middle, right? The woodwinds are the most heterogeneous in terms of voice, in terms of sound, because each instrument within the woodwind section sounds very, very different. The flute sounds very different than the oboe, right? And the clarinet sounds very different than the oboe or the English horn or the bassoon, right? And so with the strings, they all sound sort of the same, right? So it's brass that sits in the middle in terms of, you know, it's and then the strings are the most homogeneous, and the woodwinds are the more heterogeneous type of sound. So that when you are voicing, especially the woodwinds, depending on how you voice the woodwinds, they're gonna have one sound or another, right? You can have a more homogeneous sound within the woodwind section and more heterogeneous sound. And sometimes that is what you want, right? So if you want more color for whatever reason, then there's a specific way of voicing the woodwinds. Let me see, it's all connected, correct. Okay, let me just open the template. Fantastic. All right. So for example, we've got, so basically the way this works is so for example, with the woodwinds, you can overlap, you can concatenate, or you can have them like this, right? So for example, if you have flute, like one flute here, and then you have flute, and then you have oboe, this is gonna be a more homogeneous sound than if you've had flute, oboe, right? Like if you have the, like for example, E, C, G, E, right? Something like this. Or if you have them like this or them like this, more homogeneous, a little more heterogeneous, right? So if you do flute, oboe, clarinet, it's gonna be more homogeneous than if you do flute, like flute, oboe, like, and then clarinet, and here, right? If you concatenate, then it's gonna sound more homogeneous. That doesn't make that big of a difference with the strings. That doesn't make that big of a difference with brass. It does, but not as much, right? With woodwind, it does. So if you want more color for like a more magic effect, then more heterogeneous, right? And then also with woodwinds, you may want to sound more like flutes or clarinets, or you may want to sound more like oboes, right? Like too long. Super soft. Anyway, let me just bring this up a little bit. Sorry. Right, you may want to sound more like flutes and clarinets, or more like double reeds, like the oboes and English horns and bassoons, right? So depending on how orchestrate that family, you're gonna have a color or another, and those are important things to keep in mind when you're gonna develop. Okay, so that's that. So orchestration real quick, harmony real quick. Most of these things that we already know, but comes handy because sometimes we are trying to develop and we're trying to do things to make things too complex. The first time that I felt like comfortable developing something, so composition is 5 years, and I was in fifth year. We were the project, the year project was writing a 60 minutes cantata, right? And so I was studying this course, and I was listening something from the BC. And so basically, there was this melody that did something like it did something like this. It did. It was with the strings, right? And I'm gonna select like an ensemble of strings, and it did something like it was something like. silence, slower, silence, and then and I was like, wait a minute, hold the phone. I just played it back and I counted. It was like 30 seconds of music. And literally it was like, I don't know, like 20 notes. It's just the strings, like violins, tire-do-don, violas and cellos, tire-do-don, and then cellos and double basses, tire-dom, boom. And it's like just repeating the same thing, right? It's like, and it's like sometimes we make things too complex, right? And to me, that was an epiphany, right? And especially when you're studying music and composition, we live in this non-real world where we have assignments and we try to put everything that we know into a 2 minutes assignment, right, or an exercise or a piece of music. And it's not the way it works. The music has a very specific goal with the scene, or maybe it's library music. So it's not a show-off thing. It's not just so you show off how good you are, which happened to me for many years, like me trying to demonstrate how good I was, and you know how many things I could fit in 2 bars, right? And so the development actually is about establishing limitations. Tire-do-don, tire-do-don, tire-do-don. So it's like these 5 notes, tire-do-don, these 4 notes, right? And then it's a very specific movement. It's got like very specific intervals, and how can you use these 4 notes or these 2 intervals or whatever it is to develop it into a larger thing. So the first thing is actually establishing limitations, right? Because we could write everything. You can do whatever you want with music, right? You can do so many things, but the problem is like the problem with if you do one thing and then transition to another and then do something completely different and then another thing is like that you lose the audience, and you don't want to lose the audience. You want to install something in their subconscious brain and then use that thing that you presented initially to develop the entire orchestra, to develop the entire piece. And that is establishing limitations for you as a composer and then playing around with those limitations, okay? So it doesn't have to be a masterpiece every 2 hours. It doesn't need to be a long theme. It doesn't need to be thematic or even motivic. And silence is an important part, as as well as a piece. So variation. What can we do to add variation and to develop this? First thing is the most important part is if it's library music, structure. Structure. You want to have a structure. So just establish what it is going to be. What it is going to be. So maybe it's a trailer track. So it's going to have an intro. Then it's going to have like the A section or like the theme sort of thing, right? And then A again, bigger. Right, and then it's gonna have sort of like the bridge, and this is gonna be smaller, right? And then it's gonna have A again, super big, and then outro. All right, so I'm gonna have 8 bars here, 16 bars here, and then another 16 bars. You're gonna have 8 bars, 16 bars, or maybe 16 plus 8, something like this. Maybe you can repeat this and then like repeat. And this is 16 clearly is 8 by 8, right? So repeating the thing twice. 8 plus 8, then 8, then maybe 16 plus 8, and then the outro maybe it's 4 bars. All right, that's it, right? So establish the structure first. That's gonna be very, very helpful. And then we've got 3 types of variation. We've got melodic variation, we've got orchestration variation, and then we have other types of variation, harmonic variation, etc., etc. I'll describe this in a second. So, in terms of melody, let me just slow the piano here. Piano. All right, cool. So melodic variation. So we've got repetition. Repetitions basically, we've got this thing. It's got a ton of reverb, and this one. Can we have less reverb? Oh, you know what? I'll grab this. Yes. All right. So first type of variation is just repetition, right? Now, in fact, let me use this. Yeah. right? Like the typical sort of like ending climatic moment. It's just repetition, toteti, 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 just same or different octave, right? So that's the first thing. Another thing that you can do is sequence, right? Like, let me just, right? Same thing in different parts. And this is a very short motif, right? But you can have a melody that you're just repeating in another somewhere else, right? Sequence is more when this fast sort of like short motif, but you can apply the same concept with a long melody. Then we've got inversion, right? Inversion is like if you have, for example, like, right, do-re-di-don, do-re-di-don, do-re-di-dam, do-re-di-dam, right? So if you've got this, takadatan, takadatan, takadadan, taradadan, and you have this, right? Then you can use this the same way. Inversion is like putting a mirror, like, and if it does ton, tan, 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 then it would be like tan, 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 right? Instead of, right? Right? It's just inversion, and that can work for an entire melody, right? So if, for example, we have this, we could have this exact melody going the other way around, right? Instead of piano, instead of doing this, right? You could do, right? Or sort of thing, right? That's so that is inversion. Retrograde, you can do melodic or rhythmic. So this one here, retro, and this is basically. So if we have this melody, right? So it goes like this: ton ton tan ton tin. Retrograde is the other way around, right? It will be to ti to ta to tin. Sorry. Sort of thing, right? And then you can do retrograde inversion, which is doing this plus inverting it. So you can do that. Then we've got diminution and augmentation that we saw earlier. So diminution is just if you have this melody, which is sort of like slow, then you can have a motif like, right? I just did, you didn't see it, but I just did the same thing faster. Right? It comes from the same thing. It's just a way of melodic variation. And augmentation is the same concept, just slower, right? So just slower, and you can extend this concept to the extreme. Like, for example, you could have this. So if you have these notes, do, do, da, do, di, do, you could have these notes for the bass, right? I skipped one. I skipped this one. I didn't. It was a mistake. But I just took the same melody. I extended, right? I augmented the melody, and I used it for the notes on the bass. If you extended this even farther, more to the extreme, you could use these notes as maybe like central, like the central key or the key for like a movement, right? If you are writing a symphony, maybe you could have the first movement in C, the second in G, like the third in F sharp, right? Or something like this. So that's that. Augmentation, variation is what we've done, right? Maybe you have something like, this is your motif or your theme. Then let me just go with something that's more memorable, like so yeah. And then the second time we could do the same thing, just adding a little bit of variation. Yeah. Okay. right? Adding a little bit of variation, but using sort of like the same structure, the same thing, just adding a little bit of variation. And then contrast is that it's not variation, but it's like if you are in this sort of like a maybe like action-y type of thing, and you have it's like yeah. Sort of thing. It would have a little bit more of a timbric contrast as well, so we could have the brass there, right? Something like this. So that's that. And then in terms of orchestration, we can increase, we can decrease. So increasing is the typical trailer thing, right? We've got this melody, we build the 8 bars, same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again, just more bigger, and every time we add more instruments and more synths and more, it's just orchestration variation increasing, and that's it. But the melody, the harmony, you know, it's okay with trailer music to use the same chords over and over and over and over again, and just increase the orchestration, make it sound louder, boom, and that's it, right? You have a bridge, maybe introduce something new there, and then bring back the same material over and over. It's okay, there's nothing wrong with that with trailer music. So increasing, decreasing, contrast, what we just talked, changing register, repeating the same thing, what we've seen earlier, right? The thing that we've seen with the DBC. Timbric evolution, like within sections and instruments, like having a very simple idea that you repeat it, do it once and then you repeat it, maybe with another instrument, right? Timbric variation, timbric evolution. All right, and then other type of variations when we've got harmonic variation. We can have an idea, we harmonize it. We can add extension the second time that we repeat it. We can simplify the harmony. Then we have rhythmic variation, right? We've got ta 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 tan ta 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 tan, or like tan ta tan tan ta tan tan ta tan tan ta tan. That's the ostinato, right? We can break that ostinato, add a little bit of variation there, tan ta tan tan ta tan 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 ta tan tan ta tan, and go back to the. So that's rhythmic variation, and we can apply many of the concepts that we've used here for rhythmic variation. We can use like retrograde. So if you got tan ta tan tan ta tan, we can do it the other way around. We can add variation, we can add contrast. To that rhythm, and then other type of variation. So outside of music, outside of what's music like. Before we start talking about sound, so music, it's like the notes, harmony, all these things. If we there's also variation in. We can variate the sound, right? We can play around with depth, right? We can have a piano that's doing something very simple. Right, I've got it here. I could do something like I could do like. And then I'm gonna move it far away. It's much more reverb. I'm also adding some more variation. But you could repeat the same thing, and then you could automate the reverb, and it's farther and farther away, right? You can change panning. You can have a synth, or you can have an instrument that moves around, right? That's it. And and that alone is creating the variation that, it can be very, very simple. Just one note, dong, like an arp note, dong, it moves away, dong, and then moves farther away to the deeper and deeper, and also moving to the right side, dong, dong, and all these things. And you could do that type of automation with all the things that you have available when it comes to music production. Reverb, compression, EQ. You can have a percussion that's more loose, and you can start compressing it to gain punch and all these things. You can EQ. You can start cutting, which is very common with synths, right? A wah 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 type of thing with the filter. So you can do all sorts of things. You can create variation with the style as well. Excuse me, 1 second. Huh? No sé. Hello? All right. And so, for example, you can start with one style and then keep the same musical elements, the same sort of like maybe melody, but then change slightly the harmony in the orchestration to go to another style. So those things you can do if you don't have to stay in the same style because maybe you're following a scene and it requires another style. And then you have a combination of everything. Just mentioning that if you don't have melody, because it's not like melodic music or it's more like contemporary music, maybe the decaphonic music, and you are working sort of like a pitch class set or something like this, where you don't have the melodic variation, right? You have all these things. You have the harmonic, you have the rhythmical variation. You can do all these things. You can modulate, right? You can do the same thing. You can move the pitch class set somewhere else. So those are things for you to remember. All right. So, but remember, it doesn't have to be a masterpiece. It has to be something that is effective. And that's sort of like what we, that's sort of what we are trying to do here. Every day a different style, right? And then 20 minutes or 15 minutes or 12 minutes to do something. It's like, don't think about it, just do it, right? If it serves the purpose, it serves the purpose. It has to have a quality. It has to have quality, obviously. And but don't overthink things. Do them. It's funny because when you go back, so Michael, he was a student from the first class from October, and he told me, we did the sadness style, and he shared the story with me. He told me I didn't have, so I finished the class, and then you told us to finish the piece. I did 20 seconds, and you told us to do 2 minutes, and then I didn't have much time, but I did it, right? I spent 40 minutes. I did it. Well, I wasn't very proud, but I just did it. Okay, and then in the evening, the kids got home, and I showed them, and I showed them the music. I showed them the track, and they said, "Wow, Dad, this sounds so sad," and he was so it meant so much for him because he didn't compose music. He's not a composer. It was the first time that he wasn't a composer, and so it's the first time that he was composing music. So he composed Love in the last week, and then Sadness the next week, and then showed to his kids, and they were like, it sounds so sad. It meant so much for him because actually he was trying to compose a sad track. So he didn't overthink it. He just did it. And for someone else who's not you, the composer, who are judging everything that you do, it sort of like served the purpose. He was trying to write sad music, and that was sad music. Sometimes you don't have to overthink things. So and try to focus on the music, not on the idea what your music should be. Remember that where focus goes, energy flows. So if you focus on the music, the energy goes to the music, and the good ideas go to creating the music. If you focus on this should be a masterpiece, then you are creating that problem, and the energy goes to the problem, not to the solution of actually writing the music. All right? So that's that. And then sometimes I get the question when it comes to development, it's like, but I don't know enough about theory and harmony orchestration. Master the style instead. Master the style, write different styles, and when you start the practice, doing the thing creates that practice and creates. You're gonna master all these things while doing, not studying. You can study the books. You're gonna spend as much time as I did, right? 15 years, but still, it's the doing. It's the doing what's gonna make you master that. All right. So that's that. Any other question? That's into development.
Yep, I have a question. Just for inspiration, could you provide an example out of you, just without thinking, what would be a good example for you sonically for Suspense, an existing composed track? Like we did one with Love. You recommended, I guess it was John Powell. But could you recommend some Suspense tracks, maybe one or two?
Yes. So many of the Christopher Young's movies, those that are not horror, as a great suspense music. The name of the movie. 1 second. So Basic Instinct. That's it's a little bit dated, but it's the cliche of the style as well. So the
Okay.
Basic Instinct soundtrack, it's piano and string suspense thriller type of thing, 100%.
Silence of the Lambs is a really good score.
There you go. Another one, Jennifer 5. It's another one from Christopher Young. It's not very known movie, but one of his first movies. like the intro credits.